So Michael, you've been the MLA in the Vancouver-Langara area for over 7 years to date. You're not running again this year. What was the reason behind your decision?
Well, it's been a long 2 terms, 7.5 years. I have a very exciting opportunity to go back to the private sector with a company, Urban Logic. It's in the GovTech data analytics space. I've been a mentor to the co-founders back in 8 years ago when they founded the company. And they work with municipalities and state governments all over North America, relating to how do you break down data silos within government around transportation management, urban planning, as well as emergency management, and how do you build better communities. And so that's been an important opportunity for me after 2 terms as the MLA here. We have a very strong candidate that I was able to recruit and bring on and support, and that's Jamie Stein, and he'll be running in the next election. That's the reason why I decided not to seek a 3rd term.
So in your opinion, what are the most important qualities in an MLA?
I think someone who is going to work hard for the residents that he or she wants to represent, someone who's connected to community, likely someone who's had a good track record of community active involvement with local community issues and organizations, someone who understands the issues and has the both the insights and the skills to analyze, engage with people. So that means good communication skills. It means having a deep understanding of community-based issues and being able to represent those issues. And someone who's obviously prepared to work very hard to represent constituents, here in my case in Victoria, in the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia. MLAs who want to represent our community also do other roles, whether they're in government and have the opportunity to serve in cabinet or parliamentary secretary type roles. I was the parliamentary secretary for affordable housing when I was elected back in 2017 for about 3.5 weeks before the government changed, ultimately. But I've served in other roles in the opposition with the BC United, formerly known as the BC Liberals, in the area of justice, transportation infrastructure and Translake, Indigenous relations and reconciliation, and also Attorney General critic again now. So these are just the kinds of indications of the kinds of skill sets that to be an effective MLA, those who want to consider running for public office would want to keep in mind.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Having a track record of lots of community service is definitely very important for MLAs. So speaking of, personally, you have a lot of experience volunteering and being involved in our community. For example, you were on the board of directors at Arts Umbrella for over 8 years and also served on the board of directors for the YMCA Foundation here in Vancouver for a couple years. These are both institutions that support our local youth. So being so involved with the youth in our community, what are some of the reasons that you would encourage students to start volunteering and being involved in our community?
Yeah, I would say that, and this is partly why I was very open to working with your team here as you are students yourselves. And I think journalism and communication, broadcasting, media production, these are all, as your group is doing, is a very important opportunity and platform for learning. Those in front of the camera and behind the camera on your team. I myself have had many roles in high school, and I think that I encourage in elementary school. I think student involvement, being an active participant in your school communities, in elementary school and high school, and then university for those who go on to university, it's so important. There are others, of course, that have many activities, whether it's in dance, gymnastics, sports, music, arts, in their churches, outside of schools too. That's also very important activities. I think that those make for a better rounded student. In my case, I did a number of those kinds of activities, whether in sports or music, in high school and student leadership. But in university, I started in community working with youth at risk in 1984, apart from volunteering in hospitals. And I think that really introduced me more to the Chinese Canadian community, certainly in Chinatown, in social service and integration of new Canadians into Canadian society. Young people, but then elderly people, families, and other ones. And so, I went from there into youth leadership activities. I was selected to be part of a National Youth Advisory Committee. I turned my focus in university to political science from finishing my first degree in science, and so I went into student government. I clearly have had a focus on children and youth and families, having had a young family myself, my wife Christina, with 3 children. So science world, as vice chair there, and then Arts Umbrella, as you mentioned, as chair of that board. That was a 15-year continuum of 2 organizations, both organizations believing in the importance of what I just talked about. How do you support children and youth to better understand science-based learning in a hands-on way through Science World British Columbia, or arts and culture, creativity, and an arts umbrella kind of way across the province. So these are 2 organizations that are just examples of how we add to our own development for our children and our youth. And these are important organizations as not-for-profit organizations. YMCA is a long historical organization across North America, and in British Columbia there are a number of different chapters and associations. I was very happy to be involved with their foundation board to help build that stronger financial footing for that widespread organization across many different areas of family and youth and leadership and community. These are just good examples of organizations that they have youth leadership programs. My wife certainly was involved with the youth leadership program at the Y, and these are just examples of how do we get that kind of exposure and give back to have young people have those opportunities as well.
So being born into a family of immigrants and growing up in a multicultural environment, how has this background influenced your values and shaped you as a person today?
I think that my parents came from Hong Kong. My father came in 1953 as an international student. My mother came in 1962. My father studied mathematics, chemistry at UBC. He became a pharmacist. He was a small business owner on the east side of Vancouver. I grew up working in those drugstores in my early childhood years into my teens. My mother came over as a nurse, and she went into home care with the Victoria Order of Nurses and the City of Vancouver Health Department. I would say that my parents raised me to be a very open, integrated, involved young person in Canada. I know that through my father and his learnings in Hong Kong of Chinese philosophy, art, and history, he shared that with me, as did my aunts and uncles. When my grandmother came from Hong Kong as well, obviously from her Buddhist religion and cultural beliefs, I think I had that perspective as well. And then traveling as I did back to Hong Kong or China, you have that appreciation too. But I think that as a Canadian of Chinese descent, that my ultimate understanding of my identity in a diverse society here in Canada was really more in my later high school years and university years, as I touched on earlier, and working on issues which are social justice related in the sense of head tax redress. I worked on that in the mid 1980s, and as we know historically in Canada, with those highly discriminatory laws, both as a head tax, but then ultimately as a Chinese Exclusion Act from started in 1923 until it was repealed, 24 years later. These are just examples of an understanding of who we are as a country and how we continue to embrace our different phases of leadership in society. And so being involved in community with organizations like Success or the CBA Vancouver and the Human Rights Committee, the Chinese Cultural Center, Dr. Sun Yat-sen Gardens. I had certainly good friends who were volunteers there as well and spent a lot of time there. These are the kinds of exposures and learnings that we have to our own Chinese culture and understanding culturally, language-wise, and appreciate that. I was part of the Chinese Student Association in university, which is how I met my wife, Christina, when we were fellow executives on that student association executive back in the day. These are just examples, again, of how you sort of discover who you are as a person and where you come from and your history is.
So you mentioned how our community is very diverse, and it is important to focus on bringing all the different ethnicities that are in this community together. So what do you believe are some of the key factors for success in a community such as the one we have here that is so multicultural?
Well, I think that like my parents, I know that for so many families, immigrant families, whether it's our grandparents or our parents, in my case, they made a lot of sacrifice to come to a new country, to oftentimes work more than one job, to raise their family, to give us the opportunity to go to better schools, to have a better upbringing in a neighborhood or community that we hope is safe. So come by Manny. This is Manny Pabla. Their family owns and operates what is the historical heart of the Punjabi market here, the Himalaya restaurant.
And it's been going on for the last 52 plus years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Yeah.
52 years,
52
right?
plus, yeah.
Yeah.
Same people, same family, same recipes.
And also as a healthier and sustainable neighborhood and community. These are the kinds of things in a better environment overall. These are certainly the kinds of things that people expected in the 80s, 90s, 2000 period, and things have changed quite a bit, of course. We're under a lot of challenge and change, but I think that better future and that sacrifice is what we recognize for our immigrant parents and grandparents and others. I think that we hope that we continue to have a very respectful, tolerant, inclusive society. And by and large, Canada is built on that multicultural set of perspectives and values. But I also think that between ethnocultural communities, even in the Lower Mainland, I've seen this for decades, and it's been a constant theme for me as to how you bring together communities of different ethnocultural backgrounds, different languages, different religions and beliefs, and how do we integrate more in an interfaith, multi-faith, multicultural kind of way, beyond just the usual traditional costume and dance performances. I think those things are very important. Food, I think these are very important things to understand each other's cultures. But I do think the better integration and understanding and collaboration is just as important. And of course, when that doesn't happen, then we get ourselves into situations like we saw in the pandemic with a significant rise of Asian hate, and where everyone who looks similar is targeted for people who want to blame others for what has been a worldwide health pandemic. We've seen that lately as well through the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7th. That again, people in the Jewish community, including the community that represents and that I represent, that makes a significant portion of my riding Vancouver era, being targeted for who they are, whether it's their children, whether it's in their business place or in their workplaces, university campuses with encampments. I mean, these are just two examples of where I think we've had a breakdown in our civil society here in Canada. And so I do believe that no one community ought to stand by and watch another community be targeted. Nobody wants to see innocent lives killed and ended. But I do think here locally in the province of British Columbia and our city streets in Canada and in Vancouver that we ought to do a better job in ensuring that nobody lives for fear of hate and violence and random attacks and all of that. So, I think that that's where there's been a real breakdown in many ways of our Canadian society, and I think we need to continue to be very vigilant in reaching out and supporting each other.